Thank you so much. It is so awesome to be here in Miami. I love, love this community. It was so nice to be in New York and just get to experience just what an inclusive and welcoming group of people this is. And I'm the founder of DMG Digital. I'm a bit of a unicorn. I'm not an SI. I own a digital marketing agency, but we partner with great SIs like Above the Fray to help bring e-commerce solutions to our clients. And most of our clients are in B2B manufacturing. And this topic I'm talking about today is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is navigating change. And if any of you have ever worked with B2B manufacturing companies, you know they are very change averse and very risk averse. And so today I'm going to be talking about some strategies that we've used that have really helped our clients move through that change management process. So how many of you here have ever seen this sculpture before? Raise of hands. I bet probably. Ah, very nice. Awesome. So this is my absolute favorite sculpture of all time. It's by Bernini, and you can find it in Rome. And basically, this sculpture depicts the story of the Greek myth Apollo and Daphne. And here's how this story goes. So Apollo is a pretty arrogant dude, okay? And he does something to really piss off Cupid. And Cupid, in retaliation, decides that he's going to shoot Apollo with an arrow. And that arrow causes him to fall madly and desperately in love with the nymph Daphne. But Apollo doesn't stop, or Cupid doesn't stop there. You know, you think he's the god of love, but he's really not so lovely. He also shoots an arrow at Daphne that causes her to have just nothing but contempt and hatred for Apollo. She wants nothing to do with him. So here you have Apollo, and he's just so desperately chasing after Daphne. He wants her so badly, and she just can't get far enough away from him. So in this final moment of desperation, she calls out to her father, the river god, and begs him to turn her into a laurel tree. And so you can see her hands in this just like instant transformation. They're like turning into leaves, and her hair. And if you look at her face, you can see this amazing combination of terror and utter relief as she realizes that she's finally free from Apollo. And so I want you guys to all just close your eyes for a minute. Think about one of your e-commerce projects that you're working on. Maybe you're in the early phases of discovery and you're dealing with like a really ornery stakeholder who just doesn't seem to see how e-commerce can work for his business. Or maybe you're in the middle of a build and you've got scope creep and you just can't seem to keep the client's budget reined in. Or maybe you're struggling to get requirements from the client just to even get started. So just imagine for a minute what it'd be like if all of those problems could just magically disappear and the company would be instantly transformed and everything would just be hunky-dory, right? That stakeholder would walk in the next day with a big smile on his face and be like, I get it, let's do it. That client that's got scope creep and keeps, adding requirements would come in and say, blank check, whatever you need, it's yours. And all those problems would disappear and the store would be magically performant and it would be wonderful, right? Like, wouldn't that be amazing? Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I have dreamed for that to happen. But the reality is much different. Change is hard. It takes a lot of patience and work and effort, and it takes people, and sometimes a lot of people. And so I want to talk today about the 5 phases of change that, from my experience working through many digital transformation projects over the years, these 5 phases of change that people go through whenever they're trying to adopt and go through digital transformation. And those are the resistance phase, the excitement phase, frustration, adoption, and the holy grail. This is where we want all of our clients to be, right? Where the store is just magically performant, so many conversions and sales, and everyone across the company is adopted, and it just becomes the way we do business, right? And I liken this to my 2 beautiful daughters. My oldest daughter is 13, and my youngest is 8, and they're both learning to play the piano. How many here have kids learning a musical instrument? Raise your hand. If you do, if you know that all of these 5 phases of change your children are going through, and mine certainly have. I have seen my youngest sitting at the piano, completely overwhelmed by a piece of music, literally asking me to sit next to her and help her note by note with the song. I've seen my oldest pound her hands on the keyboard and tell me she hates me and she doesn't want to do it anymore. It's hard, it's boring, and she wants to quit. And I've seen both of them so excited after a recital when they're just so proud of what they've accomplished. And I've definitely been there through the adoption phase where I'm hearing the same song over and over and over again. So let's talk about these phases, right? Let's talk about the first phase, the phase we all love to hate, the resistance phase. This can feel like the Berlin Wall that sometimes takes decades of Cold War strategy just to get through, right? I mean, we all know this guy that sits in the room at the first discovery call and says, this is never going to work for my business, right? This is like the sales reps who sit there quietly and they don't say anything, but then behind the scenes, they're complaining and backbiting and sabotaging, right? So there's this phenomenon that's called the uncertainty bias. It's been very well studied by psychologists. And what this phenomenon tells us is that anytime someone is faced with something new or novel or even ambiguous, the natural response is to respond with negativity. It is literally human nature for people to react negatively to change. And so by recognizing that, I think that can help us as partners to realize that rather than resistance being a step backwards, this is actually a step forward in the change management process because they're now accepting this new way of doing things and moving forward. And here are some strategies I found that really help overcome and break down the resistance. The first is to conduct a customer and employee needs assessment. It's all about listening and inclusion and making sure that you're including all of the stakeholders very early in the process. The third thing is something I found very important, especially when working with B2B companies who are so used to doing things and have built their business using these traditional sales strategies, is you've got to respect that tradition. You have to respect the tradition the company was built on and find a way to embed that in through the transformation. And then the last one is to have clients have past clients share wins with new clients. And our partner Above the Fray did this with one of our clients, US Air Filtration. It was fantastic. They had one of their previous clients actually come in during the discovery phase and share what that transformation process was like for them. The highs, the lows, the pains, and ultimately the successes that they had. And that really helped them to really be able to envision themselves in that future. And it reduced some of that uncertainty that comes when people are going through change. So let's talk about this needs assessment. So when I'm going to use the example of US Air Filtration. If you were in New York, you know I spoke about this particular client. And when I first came in, I was the e-commerce champion, and I came in and sat down with all of the stakeholders, just guns blazing. We need to do e-commerce, and here are all the reasons why, and this is going to transform your business. And I did so much talking, I didn't do any listening, and you can imagine I was met with like nothing but death stares. It was terrible. So I quickly realized, well, it actually wasn't so quick. It took me some time to realize that I needed to actually take a step back and do more listening. And so we actually took the time to talk to customers one-on-one and talk to employees one-on-one and really understand not just what the challenges were and the friction points were in the purchasing process, which was very important. We needed to know those things. But the most important question that I asked them that really was the most valuable was we asked them what was going right. We wanted to know what was working well. And I found that there was a really common theme across all of these conversations that I had, that the thing that was going right in this organization is that the customers really valued that relationship that they had with their sales rep. And the employees too. That was really very important to them. And that became the thread of tradition that led us through this whole transformation. And that's so important as you're working with these legacy clients, is you've got to identify that thread of tradition because it grounds people through change. It's something familiar that they can hold on to. And so we were able to now position e-commerce not as a threat to the sales rep, but actually as a way to elevate the sales rep relationship. And then the walls of resistance started to come down. And the other thing we learned through this process is that these customers really wanted the convenience of being able to order online. And so I was able to take this data to the stakeholders and say, hey, look, this is what your customers are telling you. You think this isn't going to work for your business. You think this is not what your customers, they don't want this, but they're telling us that they do. It's really hard to argue with data. So the next phase is the excitement phase. And this is when expectations are really high. And everybody's excited and they're all juiced up about how e-commerce can change the business. And it's everyone's happy. It's a wonderful time period. And I found that the thing that really helps is to galvanize people through this process, but also temper those expectations. A lot of times these clients have massive expectations of what they want their store to look like. And the reality is, especially when you're dealing with a B2B client, that process takes a lot of time, and you've got to take that, crawl, walk, run approach to get them to where they ultimately want to go. So it's really important to, level set with them and make sure that you're tempering those expectations, but also help them come up with a compelling why. And they need to come up with it. They, the client, they need to have that why that's going to be the North Star for the organization, so that when things get hard and people are struggling and they're banging their hands on the keyboard, they have something that can pull them through it. The second thing is to lay out an e-commerce roadmap with milestones for development, but also for training. And I'm going to talk about this later. And then having the stakeholders create an e-commerce adoption plan early in the process and letting them own it. When you have the sales team responsible for coming up with that adoption plan, they now have ownership in that process. And when they have ownership and they have control over it, they're going to be much more invested in the outcome. When you're dealing with B2B companies who have distributor networks, sales teams, adoption is so critical. You've got to make sure that everyone on the team is adopting. And then you've got to normalize the phases of change. So this is kind of like plane turbulence. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm experiencing plane turbulence, I get pretty anxious. My stomach drops, my heart starts racing. It's not pleasant. But when the pilot gets on the intercom and actually acknowledges what's happening and says, hey, we're having turbulence now. It's going to be another 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. Instantly, my anxiety goes down because there's less uncertainty. So we can normalize this process for our clients by letting them know in advance, hey, there's going to be times when it's going to get bumpy. Things are going to happen that we weren't planning for in discovery, and let them know that this is all part of the process. And then, of course, to celebrate. So I host a weekly manufacturing show, and we recently had Chris Watson on. He's the general manager of US Air Filtration, and we talked with him about his digital transformation process. And one of the questions we asked him was, what advice would you give to other clients? And his advice was to be very clear on the purpose of e-commerce for your business. And for them, it was so critical because knowing that why was to preserve that sales rep relationship, that really guided all of the requirements that we needed, so that they could prioritize what needed to happen right away and what things could they put off later. Which now takes us to the next phase, the frustration and overwhelm phase. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't tell you how many times I've been in the middle of this phase and I just want to hit the fast forward button. Can we just move to the end and there's just rainbows and butterflies and we can all just skip down the yellow brick road happy, right? But the reality is that anytime you are going through change, you are going to encounter frustration. It's supposed to happen that way. I think about my daughters. There's no way they would master a piece of music if they weren't feeling challenged or frustrated or overwhelmed at some point. So this is a normal part of the process, and it's important that we understand that our clients are going to get frustrated at times. But there are things that we can do as partners to reduce that frustration and to reduce the intensity of it and how long that they're frustrated. Because the risk and the danger is the longer that they stay in that frustration phase, the more likely they are to quit. The more likely they're not going to be able to reach the full potential of their platform. So a couple weeks ago, I sent out a survey to my LinkedIn community and asked SIs to share their feedback on what it was like for them with their B2B e-commerce projects. I wanted to kind of get a state of the union and understand what were some of the challenges that they were having. And I got some awesome data. Almost 200 people responded. And this next slide I'm going to show you shares what percentage of new business for SIs is coming from B2B clients. And as you look at this chart, ask yourself how this falls for your business. What's interesting here is that a good number of new business right now is coming from B2B. And when I think about the manufacturing community in particular, there are 600,000 manufacturers in this country, and so many of them are ripe and ready for e-commerce, and they need help getting there. And so this is like a massively untapped market, I think. This next slide talks about some of the most frequently requested B2B e-commerce requirements. So as you look at this next slide, just see how this stacks up with what you're seeing. These are some complex requirements. B2B is complex. And because of the complexity of B2B, we also have to have an equal strategy on how we're going to help our clients be able to know and understand and meet that complexity. There is a massive learning curve for these clients who are legacy clients who have a traditional way of selling and doing things. E-commerce is like a whole new language for them with a completely different alphabet that they don't understand. And so we as partners need to figure out how we can arm them and support them so that they feel supported through the process, but ultimately so they can reach the potential of those stores. So this next slide talks about training. And I asked SIs, what topics are you typically training your clients on? And whoa, I'm falling over. And this is what they shared. And I want you to, as you look at this, ask yourself, how does this align with the training that we're providing to our clients? And what's interesting is everyone pretty much 100% said that they're training their clients, like, of course. But what's interesting is when you look at the breakdown of what clients are getting trained on, the majority of the training is happening on the admin panel. But there's so much opportunity for partners to add value by training clients on some of these basic e-commerce biz ops topics that these clients don't understand, like how to set up a sales adoption plan, how to even just basic e-commerce terminology, shipping rules, payment processing. Like if you look at this, there's a massive opportunity to provide some additional support. And the next slide talks about how many hours of client training that SIs are including in their contracts. So as you look at this slide, ask yourself how you stack up. What's interesting here is that a significant number are providing 5 hours or less of training. And if you think about the complexities of B2B, again, there's so much opportunity for SIs to add more value here. They need more help. So if you'd like to get the full report, you can download it here. There's a whole bunch of information here on nearly 200 SIs shared what they see as the biggest challenges in B2B and also their recommendations on how to solve them. It was so super fun to dive into it. So one thing that can really help with this is to have an e-commerce coach. This is someone who can stand in the feet of the client and the feet of the SI and really bridge the gap. Someone who can liaise with the technical team and be the trainer to help support. And that training should start early, very early on. So they should be responsible for laying out a training roadmap. And that early training is basically e-commerce 101, right? The more they understand it at a high level, it doesn't need to be in-depth training on every little nuance and everything, but a high-level training will help arm them to be able to make better decisions and feel less frustrated because they're going to understand what's going on through the build phase. And this coach can be an e-commerce therapist. I can't tell you how many clients and prospects I've talked to who either have a store or are looking to invest in e-commerce and they're just struggling to manage it. It's frustrating. And this person can also serve to celebrate key milestones. When you are in the frustration phase of a project, it is very easy to forget the progress that you're making along the way. So having someone who can make sure that you're documenting those small wins every single time, so important, and finding ways to celebrate them in small ways. And another opportunity for SIs is how can you bake in training into your maintenance agreements? Because as the store continues to evolve, which it will, there's going to be a need for additional support there. So now we're at the next phase. It's not the last one. We're almost there. The adoption phase. And this is really where the rubber meets the road, right? This is where it becomes so important for clients to actually get in there and frontline employees to actually use the store understand how to masquerade as the customer, know how to set up accounts. And this adoption phase is so critical in B2B. Cannot overestimate how important it is. And so, because not only are you having to get your employees to adopt to this new way of selling, they have to get their customers to adopt. Their customers are so used to buying a certain way, and they've got to learn how to do it. And the only way that they're going to be comfortable and confident to get their clients to adopt is if they are comfortable and confident doing it. So one thing that we've done that's really helped is to develop an on-demand training wiki with video and written SOPs that the client can access at any time. We have train the trainer workshops with our lovely partner Above the Fray that have really helped us build that framework for the team internally so that they have a good support there to help them. And then incentives. This is so important. You've got to bake in incentives. If sales teams, we all know salespeople love rewards and incentives. So going back to that e-commerce adoption plan that needs to be laid out at the beginning of the project, making sure that you're building out those incentives and creating adoption KPIs that you're following. And the last point is to have a feedback loop. Make sure that there's a place, whether it's a ticketing system or even just a simple Google sheet or a standing meeting where employees can get feedback from customers directly on what's working and what's not working so that you can feed that back to whoever's managing, whether you have a coach, your e-commerce coach, your technical team. Field that feedback that you're getting from customers so that you can identify, is this a development need? Is this a training need? Or is there something in our process that we need to change? And then addressing it from there. Man, you guys, I'm doing good on time. I was really worried that it was going to be way over, and I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, what am I going to talk about? Okay, so that now takes us to, we're nearly there. I hope you guys are still with me. These 5 phases of change: resistance, excitement, frustration, adoption, and we finally made it to the integration phase. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really looking forward to the poolside dinner tonight. So practice makes permanence. We can all do our happy dance. We've made it, right? And it reminds me of my beautiful daughter's last recital. This is them at Christmas time. They were they were playing at their Christmas musicale. And my oldest played the Sugar Plum Fairy from the Nutcracker and What Child Is This? And I did a duet with my youngest. We did Winter Wonderland. And as I sat and listened to them play, I was just completely overwhelmed and proud and just so happy with the progress that they had made and all of the hard work that they had put in to get to where they were. But I also had flashbacks to all of those painful moments along the way when they hated me and they didn't want to do it and I had to beg them to practice. And I realized that they would not have gotten there without going through all of that, but they would not have gotten there without me and my husband's support. There's no way. They would have given up a long time ago if we hadn't been there to push them and challenge them and even sit next to them and help them through it. And so as you think about your clients, as you think about specifically this B2B market, which is only going to increase and grow as you look ahead, and the needs that they have and the challenges of getting them on board and understanding e-commerce, really ask yourself, what more value, what more support can I be providing to my clients to help them be successful? Because they need support. And if you think about e-commerce, so much of the time, everyone is so great at building this fantastic software, right? Software's phenomenal. But at the end of the day, it's about people. And how can we help people through the change? And how can we really help them reach that potential? And so that is the end of my talk. And if you want to download the full presentation and the report, you can get that there. I'd love your feedback. So if you can share your feedback on my presentation, that'd be fantastic. And also in the feedback survey, there is, we are working on developing a B2B e-commerce bootcamp course and would love it if you're interested in helping us with the R&D, or if you're interested in being on a wait list for that course, please share your email address and would love to continue to connect with you on that. So, all right. Wow, I got 5 minutes to spare. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah. I knew this question was coming. I knew this one was coming. That's so funny. Yeah, for them, it was, because I had been on the team and I was the internal marketer, they were ready and willing to do it because they wanted to understand. I think if you're facing resistance in that early phase, maybe don't even call it a needs assessment. Maybe you just start by having conversations with the most ordinary stakeholders one-on-one. And when you talk to them, asking them, and even couching it saying, maybe e-commerce won't work for you. We're going to find out together if it is. I want to understand more about how you work and how you're doing your business. And the more you listen up front and then try, to get their buy-in that way. And if you're working with a client who has a marketing team, they should, this is what marketers do. So I feel like the marketers will at least invested in it, and they can help with that process of getting the leadership more bought in. Yes, they do. And I think the more you talk to the sales reps and the more you tell them that this is not going to be a threat to them, it's there to support them and show them how, then that's when it will start to even out. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Wow. Well, thanks, guys. That was fun.